Hey everyone, we're here for another quick conversation for the long haul of leadership with Tod Bolsinger, and we're going to talk about a quote from Efrem Smith today from episode 222, Building a Multi-Inclusive Church, which also featured Dan Kreis. But Efrem is the one who said this. Here's what he said. As the story of your church unfolds, is it obvious that the emerging generation is not only part of the story, but part of shaping the story that will be told? Let me read it one more time. As the story of your church unfolds, is it obvious that the emerging generation is not only part of the story, but part of shaping the story that will be told? So, Tod, let me just kind of turn it over to you. What stands out for you, and what can we learn from this particular statement?
Well, the part of it, Marcus, is I was so aware that I was thinking about this one at lots of levels. So he's basically saying, does your story actually take seriously that there's a future and that there are an emerging generation that needs to be part of your future, and that they need to also not be told what their future is. They need to shape it. And then even beyond that, is it obvious to everybody else? And this, I think, for most leaders is the rub.
Yeah.
Literally saying, I don't have a vision for the future by myself.
Yeah.
I need other people to shape it.
Yeah.
We can't possibly reach emerging generations or neighbors or new people in town and by telling them what we're going to do for them. They need to be at the table. And not only do they need to be at the table, but we need to let everybody know that we are learning as we go.
Yeah.
There's a humility that we need more leadership to do, that instead of coming up with the perfect plan, they instead have a process that can unfold and develop more wisdom. And I think for many leaders, that's really hard for them to do.
A process. Say that again. They need a process.
Yeah. Almost every leader thinks that your job is to have the solution, right? So in my little book, How Not to Waste a Crisis, I say that almost every leader has in their voice, somebody in their head, a voice that says, don't just stand there, do something.
Right.
And really what you need to learn to do is not just do something, stand there.
Right. Yeah.
And ask, so if we are going to be a church that's about the future, whose voices should be at the table? And if we're going to ask them to be at the table, are we going to ask them to shape this process?
Yeah.
And if we're going to do so, are we going to let everybody know that it's not because those of us in power have all the solutions? We're not perfect.
Yeah.
We don't have a perfect plan, but we are going to custodian a process for deeper understanding that we're going to discover because the Holy Spirit is at work. And that's very hard for many leaders who believe their job is to be the expert with the advice and the plan. Instead, we need to be the person who is the learner, who invites people in to discover something much bigger than ourselves.
Yeah. It is hard to not to be open to not being the expert, to be willing to be perceived as not the expert.
Yeah.
And it's I was just reflecting on the church that I'm at is doing a mission study right now. And I heard that they included a 20-something on the mission study team. And, which on second thought, I was like, great. At first I was like, oh, is he too young? You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. Right?
It's that.
Right. Yeah. Think about this, Marcus. You and I were trained to believe that someday you'll get a seat at the table now.
Right.
Someday the wise people, the elders, right? It's really something to think about elders as being spiritually mature, not necessarily older.
Yeah, right.
So to have a 27-year-old who is spiritually mature and insightful and can bring value is way more life than just having, let's pick the oldest people, the people who've been around the longest or been served the longest. I mean, that's more that's a sign of vibrancy in your church as far as I'm concerned.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and it brings more perspectives, right? You get a better picture of who we are. And what God is calling us to. And so maybe talk a little bit just about the importance of having all the different perspectives and making sure that they're heard.
Yeah. When we teach people about what we call getting up on the balcony, we teach people a process of don't default to your old behaviors. Instead, enter in a process of learning. And one of the steps is getting diverse interpretations. Diverse interpretations. the interpretations that you won't get because you will see it the same way. Or if you're with, and most of us like being with people who see the world like us.
Yeah.
So we end up getting only one story, one perspective. And it's really interesting if you get a totally different perspective, because so getting diverse interpretations is one of the most important things for leaders who want to see change come.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just mention that the book that you mentioned that you just wrote is really good. I just read it over the weekend, actually, and so I would encourage people pick up that and the other 4. This one is How Not to Waste a Crisis, and then there are 4 others. And we had a great conversation on a recent episode of Spiritual Life and Leadership. So let me read the quote one more time from Efrem Smith. He said, "As the story of your church unfolds, it is obvious that the emerging generation is not only part of the story, but part of shaping the story that will be told."